So I am Anne Findeler. I'm a deputy director and I work inside the HR department for the disability program in France. I'm co-leader with Anaï and Jean-Rémy, Anaï from L'Oréal and Jean-Rémy from LVMH, of the working group on the internalization of disability policies within the Inclusion Manifesto. So the Inclusion Manifesto is a movement of business leaders committed to promoting the employment of people with disabilities in their organization. We facilitate companies sharing their experiences and best practices with each other, like today. And we act also as a bridge between the companies and the ecosystem. Currently, we have 100 member companies, mostly large corporations, and we function both as a network of executives and a network of experts. In this context, but we'll see it a bit later, we have published a guide named Internalization of Disability Policies, which presents legislation and cultural perception of the employment of people with disabilities in 11 countries around the world. So today, I'm very pleased to introduce my colleagues from India. We will presenting their diversity and disability policy. To introduce, yes, this webinar is divided into three parts. First is Raja, who is the co-founder of V-Shesh, our partner, our Capgemini India partner, which assists persons with disability by providing information, training, and placement services. Raja has a solid background, the king, we know now, with over 20 years of experience. In the second part, Sreya, Director of Diversity and Inclusion, will present Capgemini India's inclusion and disability policy. And then to finish, there will be a time for question and answers. Anaï or Jean-Rémy, do you want to?
No, I think you did a very nice introduction. So
oh, thank you.
Let's start.
Yeah, okay. So Raja, is it okay for you to start your presentation?
Yes.
And to share your screen? All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, again, very good morning in Indian Sign Language and good afternoon. These are both in Indian Sign Language. I'll quickly visually describe myself. I represent V-Shesh and today I'm wearing a blue shirt. Do not wear specs, have black hair. I'm not that young, but I still have black hair. And no mustache or beard. Any attempt to grow them has come a cropper. So that's a quick visual description of myself. And I'm going to absolute pleasure for inviting me here and the opportunity to talk about the India context and our work with persons with disabilities. At V-Shesh for us, employment we consider as a litmus test of inclusion. If a person gets a job, we see that person becoming confident of their own abilities and their own existence and purpose in this world. And then suddenly the immediate family, otherwise the immediate family is thinking, hey, what do we do? How do we support him all the time? That is what is lingering in the minds of the family. They start believing in that individual. And then we see the other friends start believing in that individual. And then people in the workplace start believing. And then as the person grows and spends money and is visible in the public place, we see the society at large starts believing in the individual. So for us, that is our mission. Everything that we do with our clients, individual clients or companies, progressive companies like Capgemini, we do to remove systemic barriers and attitudinal barriers for an individual to get equal opportunity at an employment or a labor market. I would spend the next 20 minutes talking quickly about the India context. I saw the excellent publication, internationalization made by the entity here, Manifesto entity, and extremely well documented there. But I'll spend a little bit more time giving you what the India statistics and socioeconomic context is when it comes to persons with disabilities. We will talk about the rights of persons with disabilities, it's a very, very strong and a big game changer legislation that the Indian government passed in 2016 with a lot of civil society interaction. We'll talk about that and how it has paved the way for more improving equal opportunity practices. We'll talk a little bit about government schemes and incentives, and then finally close with some of the industry good practices that we have been engaged with in the last 15 years of our work. Just to give you a context, in terms of perspectives, as you could have imagined, in India, it's a large country, 14 billion, large population. I would not say there is one view about disability. There are, at least I would say there are polarized views about disability. On one end, there is if you look at large parts of rural India and even in some parts of urban India, it continues to be seen as, among society, it continues to be seen as a disability is something that is bad that has happened to a family. A child is born with a disability. Hey, something you as parents must have done wrong, either in this life or in your previous life. That's what, quote unquote, karma. So that kind of belief system of disability being lesser is deeply rooted and largely with lesser education, awareness, etc. in rural areas, that is very, very prevalent, and lack of accessibility, etc. makes it even more difficult because people with disabilities are confined to their homes and are overly protected by the families, and they're just not visible. The visible disabilities are themselves not visible, and then there are in many invisible barriers for individuals and people with invisible disabilities like mental health or learning disabilities. We can just forget about any form of support and awareness around those disability types. But but there is hope as well. With organizations that we are talking about here have tried to create a much more, especially in cities, there is more awareness, acceptance, the education that is becoming more inclusive. There's a lot of activation, and not-for-profit NGOs, activism. There are DPOs, disabled people organizations, actively campaigning for rights. And overall, there is a positive perception. It is not seen as something very negative that is starting to emerge, especially in the cities. But still, there is an undercurrent of pity and sympathy and deep stereotypes. The confidence in the ability about an individual is still some distance away, but we are maturing on towards that path. So that's broadly what I would say when you look at the broad picture of how disability is perceived in our country. In terms of data and numbers, we are talking about 26 million people living with a disability in India. This is 2010 data. So first of all, it's outdated. And I've used the word self-declared because, as you know, because of stigma, a lot of people do not want to, even in the census, people do not want to come out and talk about the disability. So the self-declared number is 26.8 million, but there is consensus across the society, even among government, that this number is significantly discounted. We are talking of no less than, there's a World Bank data of no less than 80 million people living with a condition, which is bigger than the population of France or UK as a country. So we are talking about a big number, 7 to 10% of the population, but representation in workforce is less than 1%. Even with we have for government jobs and public sector jobs, there is what we call as a quota system. We call as reservation here, affirmative action programs, and there are 4% of vacancies are reserved. But even in government, the number of people who are working with a disability representation is less than 1%. We are so very far away in terms of having a representative workforce in employment. And private sector, significantly lower. In the most mature companies also, we see less than 0.2%, 0.1% representation. Why? I mean, just giving you a sense of the diversity in disability. We are talking about most. I mean, this is a little later data, which is it's a National Family Health Survey data, which puts the more common ones: the mobility, disability in hearing, disability in mobility, and vision. being the largest in terms of among the large ones. And then, of course, mental health, psychosocial conditions being also significant. So that's the broad split. So there is significant prevalence of all forms of disability in significant numbers across the length and breadth of the country. 70% of the population continues to live in rural India. 30% of persons with disabilities come from the urban landscape that we talk about. Of course, there is a very strong correlation between socioeconomic poverty and disability. The more poor you are from poor families, you're more likely to get lesser access to healthcare, lesser access to prenatal, postnatal care, etc. And disability incidents are much, much higher and very highly correlated with poverty. But disabilities across the socioeconomic strata, poor people, middle income, higher income, across there is disability incidents. Only 36% we are talking are employed, and we are talking about almost 64% continuing to be languishing without a job. Or even among the 36%, we still have jobs where a person with disability who's a crutch user or a wheelchair user in a lift, working as a lift operator, where there's absolutely no need for that job. It's a charity job rather than an actual job. So there is disguised employment also. If you discount for that, very, very significant levels of unemployment among persons with disabilities. And if you go cut across the various disability types, if intellectual disability and autism and mental health, it's significantly higher than 64% as well. Okay, I'm just thought of giving you this comparison between people without a disability, the non-disabled population versus persons with disability. When we talk about education, there is 100% education access to enrollment. We have a campaign of universal education, and children without a disability are enrolled in primary schools. But as we speak, even today, we still have only 61% access to among children with disabilities. So 39% are dropping out from primary education itself. Then as they go up, you can see only 20% are acquiring secondary education, which is 12 years of education, compared to 70% among a non-disabled population. Only 5% are graduating. 95% of a cohort of persons with disabilities are simply not graduating due to more factors about universities and colleges not being inclusive, not doing the outreach. Lots and lots of people just drop out as they progress high with their education. And then as a result, you'll see even among people who graduate, we have a significant number, about 500, about 1 million people who graduate or have a diploma and a skill to get into a workplace. Even despite that number, we see employment gaps being huge. So there is, as you could see, to summarize, there is lack of absolute accessibility. School infrastructure is not accessible. There is, though governments advocate towards inclusive education, we are still some distance away from providing inclusive education in all schools. What we still have is a system of special schools, blind schools, deaf schools, schools for people with intellectual disability. We call it quote unquote special schools. So as a result, lesser people get to schools. There are gaps in learning environment, no inclusive, the ratio of teachers who would do a shadow teaching or provide additional support is significantly lower. And then once even if they graduate, getting to a job, there is a delay. Even if they get a job, it's suboptimal, not matching the skill, as is the result of which you will see people who have high age, but they have maybe lesser skill, and there is a lower wage. All of that constitutes what we see huge challenges in access to education and employment. But yes, with the passing of the 2016 law, we see some hope. A lot of traction has been built in the last 5 years, with more and more awareness being created in the society and organizations, very progressive organizations coming forward. So just to give you a context of the law, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, which was passed in 2017. It was passed after India ratified the UN Convention for Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2007, and as a signatory to the UN Convention, the law was passed. The 2016 law was passed with a lot of good civil society consultation. It continues to be viewed by the civil society, and subsequent amendments are being made, etc. in the law. The big shift in the new law is earlier law, 1995 law, was a welfare approach. It looked at a medical model. There's something wrong. Let's fix. Let's donate. Let's see. It was more of a charity-based approach was very much prevalent in the law. We moved from there with a rights-based model where we see it as a fundamental right of a person to be included in public space, to participate in election, and to participate in employment and education, etc. So the shift was from not seeing, not fixing something, not a medical approach, to a seeing what are the fundamental barriers that are there, and putting the accountability on institutions and to remove those barriers, public and private institutions as well. So earlier law did not include private sector companies. The current law includes private sector companies also. There is no quota or reservation for private sector companies, but there are few obligations that private sector companies have to follow. I'll talk about that in a while. The law has also given a specific timeline for compliance, and has increased the type of disabilities from 7 to 21 specified disabilities. I'll talk about it in a while. And as I said earlier, there is quota or reservation in jobs, 4%, and in higher education institutions, it's increased from 3% to 5%. The 5 things that the law specifically calls when it comes to for private sector companies to follow is: one is to frame and publish what we call as a equal opportunity policy and register the policy with government authorities. As most organizations, progressive organizations, produce this policy with good internal consultation, and it is socialized and is a message clearly saying that yes, we are open and we are accountable to ensure there is no discrimination when it comes to recruitment and career progression for persons with disabilities. Also, the law requires someone to be specifically identified to be a guardian of the policy, and also requires all the HR practices, including provision of reasonable accommodation. Everything is revisited to ensure there is disability equity. In India, this very specifically, the law requires also the organizations to maintain records of employees with disabilities. It does not say you have to force someone to disclose. It is voluntary disclosure, voluntary identification, and that data of the individual and the type of support has to be maintained by that organization, by every organization. And if the authorities ask for it, the data needs to be provided. Yes, it is aggregated data, and it can be managed based on the privacy policy of the respective organization. And the law clearly calls out that it is a accountability of companies. Private workplace is also is considered public space and needs to be accessible. Physical environment is to be accessible by 2022. If you're providing transport, that is to be made accessible by 2019. Digitally, all ICT tools, etc. From a digital accessibility, 2019 was the goal. And all these timelines have passed, but it's, as you all know, accessibility and inclusion is a continuous process. Companies have come forward to do all of these measures to make their workplaces more and more accessible. And I've talked about the types of disabilities that are covered. Because there is a quota or a reservation, there is initially there were 7 identified categories. The more common known ones: blindness, all forms of mobility impairment, mental health, intellectual disability. In those days, it was called mental retardation, and speech and hearing impairment. The new law has increased this from 7 types to include learning, a lot of invisible conditions like learning disability, blood disorders, chronic neurological conditions, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's. All of them have been included. We're expanding it to 21 categories, but the law clearly says as we evolve in implementation of the Act, more and more types will be added, because there are so many different types of conditions where a reasonable accommodation and support is required for someone to participate as equal. So there is a provision to add more and more types in the current act. I will quickly touch upon some of the government schemes and incentives. We have a federal structure with the entire disability legislation mandated and observed and regulated by the central government, but also the central government has certain schemes for people with disabilities and employers as well. And there is the state government also has their own set of schemes and budgetary provisions made. First and foremost is the scheme where central government provides aids and equipment, assistive aids and equipments for people, acquiring a hearing aid or acquiring a wheelchair, etc. They do provide, all of them are distributed, and through campaigns, people with disabilities can avail of this at absolutely no cost. Yes, there are challenges with quality and customization, etc., but there is a scheme where people do get access to assistive devices and equipment. The government is also centralizing the database to creating a unique disability ID so that everyone gets, cash transfers, all benefits. It's a centralized data which is maintained, and the process is ongoing. Every state government, the provincial governments are encouraged to make more and more people come onto this database. Then there is a very active Access India campaign started 5 years back, where government made available funding for public spaces to do accessibility audits, and for implementation of recommendations, money was made available for improving all public spaces and governance and buildings and all the corporations offices, the government offices. Funding was available from a pocket and a kitty to improve accessibility. And then there are scholarship schemes which central government also provides for. Other than that, there is health insurance and other schemes as well. In the state level, there is a disability pension, which is for all people without a job, 1,500 to 3,000 rupees, which is 15 to 30 euro per month, is provided as a pension. Very, very subsistence, very basic level income support, social security support is provided by most state governments. And then there are scholarship supports and then funding support for schools. We do still have special schools, so the salary of the special educators and equipment, etc., are taken care of by the government. In terms of incentives, very far and few. You can see, not many fiscal incentives are available for incentivizing employment specifically. There's one on apprentice scheme where the monthly stipend, if you hire an apprentice who as a person with disability, the monthly stipend is paid by the central government. You have to register onto a portal and you'll get subsidized for the stipend payment. And then for employees with disabilities to get a job, there is additional tax exemptions and deductions that are available as per in the Indian Income Tax Act. So while a lot of work is being done by the government in terms of improving infrastructure and accessibility, making transportation accessible, the schemes to promote private sector employment, to promote skilling are still in a state of evolution, still in a state of maturity. There are far and few, still some distance to go in making the ecosystem, the public good ecosystem, accessible for persons with disabilities. Talk about some of the industry practices that have worked. We work with Capgemini and not here, and we have worked on all of these fronts. I've used this 4-pillar approach. This is from an Accenture consulting study of about 100 companies who have progressed and matured in their disability inclusion journey. Every company that has progressed has worked on all these 4 fronts, which you would know, which is enabling policy, enabling provision of accessibility at workplace, and assistive tech and devices. The second is on employee, which is about how to attract, retain, and give career progression for talent. The third is about enabling an engaging ecosystem, which is sensitization, training, and employee resource groups. And even after doing enable, employ, and engage, you still, since the starting points are not the same, it still needs companies to invest in affirmative action programs, train and hire, skilling, upskilling and mentoring, etc., etc. While I'm just going to give you a glimpse of some of the clients that we have worked with, and I'm not. I think Sreya and Shalini will be talk in detail about Capgemini. I'm not specifically quoted Capgemini here because they would be talking, but this just to give you a sense of what the companies in the as best practices are doing in all of these four pillars. On, for example, on Enable, we've seen there's all companies started rolling out what we see as a form when any new joiner comes as a reasonable accommodation form. Everyone is encouraged to talk about what support they need and saying that if you declare, we will be committed and accountable to providing that support so that you can use your talent and express your talent and grow. And also you would get, this will be aligned to whatever self income tax deductions, etc. So that's one of a good practice. And from a provision of doing accessibility audits and implementation of the entire workplace in progressing towards becoming an inclusive or accessible workplace is another good practice that most companies are currently following. We are seeing, as you all know, a centralized provision of budget and a provision of assistive tech so that it does not become a business decision. Say that if I have to hire someone, it's not going to be an incremental cost. It is going to be an HQ level cost. So that is another good practice. Society General here, Renault Nissan, we work with, have already implemented. They're also making sure there is a catalog of what all services a person with an employee, a potential candidate with a disability can get once the person becomes an employer. Note taker, additional software, screen reading software, height adjustable desks, all of them are listed. And they have gone ahead to get engaged with vendors so that they can be provided and in a very short turnaround time. We also worked on specific neuro-inclusive workplace policies, changing HR practices, recruitment practices for progressing neuro-inclusion at workplace. Caregivers, enabling, it's not only about employees, but employees with disabilities. It's about employees who have, for example, a neurodivergent child, a child with autism. There is a need for workplace readjustment, policy readjustment to ensure there's a level playing field for that person to be comfortable at workplace and not feel judged and feel belong. So there are organizations which we are working on caregiver policies. Recruitment, marking out days and weeks is the way to go in terms of ensuring there is exclusive focus, readiness, and preparedness to accelerate recruitment. We also have informal events. Society General did an informal event called Connection, where informally people participate in a hackathon where the team members, rather than an interview, they come and participate in a hackathon. Persons, employees, potential talent with disability, and managers from the organization together do engage in a hackathon and problem solving. And in that process, there is a discovery of talent and leads to conversation on hiring and progressing careers, etc. On Engage, a wide range of activity. We do monthly digests. We conduct campaigns on disability dialogues. For example, last September was the International Day of Sign Languages. We did a lot of awareness campaigns around, with children with disabilities, of children of employees learning sign language, for example, or setting up kiosks, etc., etc. And then Engage is also about training and preparing managers and recruiters. We have developed e-learning content so that everyone is inducted at least 101 on disability tickets, and then very specific case study, scenario-based content for recruiters and managers, etc. We have on the final one on Empower, train and hire programs, upskilling programs, well connect programs where we are connecting, because persons with disabilities and employee can be lonely, and especially in a remote and hybrid working environment. We do check-in conversations so that they feel they are not left out. And if there is something to be escalated from a mental health standpoint, we do bring it to the attention so that the company and the organization's wellness network can come in and support that individual. So a range of best practices across, as you could see. just quick glimpse of our work with multiple corporates in providing sensitization, culture change, and education on disability inclusion. What is common across most companies that have progressed is all of them have a very strong equal opportunity policy, which developed with good internal consultation with the society, the disabled people's movement. Most of them have launched self-ID campaign. There is infra audit, digital and physical, and annual review of the audits and implementation of the audit recommendations, centralized provision of budget and accommodations. On employment, the conventional selection processes, most of the successful organizations have revisited those selected processes, because in India, for every role, there are about 100 matching profiles. So, and all the selection process is always funnel based. We are filtering people, and we have tests which are not even fitness for purpose for the role, but we still administer those tests. So, and companies have revisited the process to make sure it is fitness for purpose. We are selecting candidates exactly for the skill requirement that is required and for which the person has to interview, and organizing exclusive drives, working with specialist agencies. When it comes to engagement, it's guard to board entire sensitization sessions for campaigns through the year, not just once when we have International Day of Persons with Disabilities, or there is an October Disability Awareness Month or anything like that, but leverage. UN specifies about 10 or 8 days, starting with January 4th, the Braille Awareness Day, March being the Down Syndrome Awareness Day, April 2nd, the Autism Awareness Day. Try and leverage each of these milestones to create more education and awareness, and also, have most of this anchored and owned by internal employee resource groups. So with that, I will finally, before I end, and just talk a little bit about our partnership with HI, which is Handicap International, the French Federation, where we worked on it was a 3-year project. It's a continuing partnership. We started from scratch. We built on the same model, the 4E model, it's just named differently. It's about focusing on policy, leadership, internal culture, recruitment practices, human resources, and partnerships with NGOs and civil society. We worked on all of these pillars. And for the first 18 months, we worked with the factory setup, with the leadership, involving the entire management team, and leading to finally hiring persons with disabilities at the factory. That practice was then replicated to the Pune setup, which is an R&D setup, and now it's getting replicated to South Africa, Sri Lanka, and Middle East as well. So this was an active partnership that where we holistically work in creating change and creating an ecosystem for people with disabilities to be employed and having career progression within the organization. I will skip this. This is the range of services that we provide for companies, and stop here and hand it back to the team. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I think it gave us really a very good understanding on the cultural point of view, but also on all the legislation and all the changes that have been operating in the last years in India, considering more disabilities in the legal space, so that really people with disabilities can really have access to a lot of benefits. You were talking about taxes with governments, and also what companies can do, even if still there is no quota still for private companies, but already in other sectors like governmental. I think this was very enlightening. So we have the second part with the Capgemini team. I don't know if perhaps someone has any questions now, like unmet. Yes.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much for this really interesting presentation. So I'm from the Renault Group, the car maker. And I was
Obviously.
particularly interested in, because you are talking about that this belief in people, that it's maybe linked to karma, that you have a disability, etc. And then you also talked about the fact that you've been working with companies about doing kind of self-ID campaigns. And this is something that we are also working on. And what we found difficult is, on top, of course, we communicate about our policy, disability policy, the advantage, etc., etc. But what I'm curious about is, are there any messages that really sort of engages particularly people from India to kind of overcome this whole karma thing, which is probably quite particular to your country? Don't know if you can say a few words about how you have kind of messaged on this subject.
Absolutely, Animate. Excellent question. I mean, the only way that we have seen, we have self-ID campaigns. I think I will also share on the link later the Deloitte campaign, which has worked very well, and over 300 people came forward and self-ID. There's a report, public report, equality report, which is available. What we have seen based on our experience, people with disabilities, because of the stigma and the other factor, they themselves are very underconfident of coming out and talking about it in the open. They themselves are feeling, how am I going to be judged? How is everyone going to be seeing me? I have the talent, but the moment I say I have a disability, people will stop believing in my talent. So I rather mask and get by. I have been living my life the last 18 years, 20 years. I've been living my life masking. Let me continue to mask. Okay. So that's besides the karma factor. Even if you just take away the karma factor, that's the compounding effect of not coming forward. And I'm sure this is not India specific. It is globally the case. Yeah, this is globally the case. What really has worked, I mean, I'm sure it works in other countries. I mean, the lack of the societal stigma helps the person to come forward a little bit, but still the person holds. So most of the places where self-ID has worked is very clear messaging and sustained messaging by the management and the leadership, saying that, hey, we are here to provide equal opportunity, here to provide reasonable accommodation support. No favor is being done. It is your fundamental. We want you all to come forward and express your talent. A constant messaging and communication by the line functions, not the HR, not DI, because they are by the line. The manager is going to tell me that if I see you can produce more, do you need any support? Please let us know. We are accountable to provide that support. Another factor, especially true to India, is sorry, Animate, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, is that people with disabilities are all come from a socio-economic strata where they already feel very gratitude, full of thankfulness. Already this company has given me a job.
Yeah.
We have already, I can't ask for more.
Yeah.
And so they tend to not voice out, tend to not ask. They say, oh, already you've given me, why, if I ask, why should I ask? I'm already very grateful.
Yeah.
The employer, the disabled employee and employee relationship, there is a difference. It does not get bridged. So one is in our advocacy programs, we tell them, the employer is not doing you a favor, nor you doing a favor. It's a mutual contract. We try, you can ask for a support any number of times. In fact, reasonable accommodation is not a one-time documentation. It is a continuous process. You may ask for more and more support. It is only it is your fundamental right to ask. But in order for the person to open up and ask, if this message comes from the manager, the line functions saying, please, so empowering the line, empowering the manager helps more and more disclosures and better IDing. Hope that gives you some sense.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's very clear for me, and it corresponds exactly to our situation. So thank you.
Thank
you. I think it's a good transition to a Capgemini team presentation to understand how the topic of disability, employees of disability and inclusion is addressed in Capgemini in India. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And thanks, Raja. I think you set the context very well for us. Shalini, if you can just, yeah, thank you. So my name is Sreya Ghosh Oberoi. For those who joined a little late, I take care of diversity and inclusion for Capgemini in India. And celebrating talent and diverse abilities is how we look at inclusion of people with disabilities. Maybe we can move to the next slide. So before I begin and share our journey, just a little bit about Capgemini. We work with so Capgemini is basically an IT organization. We work with all industries, and in our partnership with different companies, we have actually 85% of the 200 largest public companies on the Forbes Global 2000 list. We have been actually rated as the most ethical company for 12 consecutive years by Ethisphere, and we contribute to 11 of the UN's sustainable goals today. From our benefits, what we benefit through our digital inclusion initiative, and we're going to speak a little bit more about it. You will see about 25 lakh employees, not employees really, but people who have benefited from our digital inclusion initiative. And we are currently at about 360,000 employees base. We are working out of 160 nationalities, and in India we have about 175,000 employees based out of 13 locations. Yeah, we can move on. All right, so this is our group CEO, Ayman Isat, and what he is sharing with everyone is that diversity and inclusion is really a part of our culture and DNA, and those who work with Capgemini can feel it on a daily basis. It's really an experience, and I think on a broader scale, we started with gender diversity, but now we've moved on to creating inclusion for very different diversities. It could be race, it could be disabilities, it could be people from the LGBTQI community, but we are strongly working to support all types of minorities within the organization. All right, so if you see, we are committed to the Valuable 500 program, where the group is trying to unleash human energy through technology for an inclusive and sustainable future. We are driving these objectives to build a culture in which all individuals are treated fairly and respectfully, equal access to opportunities and resources across the group, and use differences between us to make a greater together, because these differences are what brings these unique ideas and innovative ideas. So getting together and working together is what differentiates us as an organization. Little bit of a quote from our India Group CEO, Ashwin Yardi. What Capgemini fosters an inclusive, an environment where individuals of all abilities can flourish. Our commitment to inclusivity and dignity is ingrained in our values and integral to our organizational culture. I think it's very important to have, our senior leadership commitment, and that's the reason why we've put this on the slide. This is a video from our last year's International Day of Persons with Disability, but his messaging really does make a very big impact within the workplace, and we continue to engage with the top leaders in the country to have them support and sponsor this journey for us. Now, in India, we have a disability inclusion framework which starts with talent. So through our digital academies, where we actually impart training to people from maybe socio-economically marginalized sections. uh, you know we are an IT company, so we gather that we need to bring IT to everyone, have everyone get the access to education, employment in IT businesses. So what we started doing was we started with the digital academies, which was targeted to mostly socioeconomically marginalized communities. But soon after we did that, we also started to work with people with disabilities. And this also became a source of or a talent pool for Capgemini. And we started to recruit from these sessions as well. These academies gave us, trained people who were able to crack the interviews and join Capgemini. So it basically focuses on talent that is not, which does not have access to IT education, employment, or training to be in an IT, space, and therefore it basically has the vision to facilitate a sustainable inclusion of talent pool, which gets marginalized because of disabilities, right? We also have a strong network within the organization. Now, the network is actually dedicated to supporting and empowering employees with disabilities. It fosters a culture of inclusion, advocacy, and a community for people with disabilities, caregivers, and allies. And we're going to obviously share a lot more about it. We partner again, and like I said, we need a lot of sponsorship from senior leaders, from our employees to drive this. So we partner with business sponsors, our business employee resource group chair, co-chair, and committee members, our business HR representatives who really help us drive this inclusion within the organization. And finally, I think what Raja also spoke about, it is in alignment with our Disabilities Act. We have an equal opportunity policy within the organization that caters to all sorts of diversities, creating equal opportunity and dignity of work for all. So whether it's irrespective of caste, religion, race, color, creed, national origins, gender, marital status, sexuality, disability. So this policy itself drives, or rather is the overarching principle of what kind of inclusion we want to drive within the workplace. We'll move on to the next slide. Yeah. So these are our pillars on how we actually drive the initiative within the organization. So if you look at our accessibility pillar, we have done accessible infrastructures by doing audits in our offices to ensure that we are compliant by and ensure that all people with disabilities are able to use this infrastructure, and also IT systems. We also do some sensitization on what is reasonable accommodation. Again, it's a term that we picked up from our Disabilities Act, which actually requires employers to give the reasonable accommodation to a person with disability so that they're able to perform at their best. By creating more awareness or sensitization around this, managers are then empowered to take the decision to create that adjustment so that our employees can actually be the best versions of themselves. Now, in terms of our recruitment process, training, and HR processes, HR policies, we have a strong non-discriminatory policies which ensure that people with disabilities do not face any discrimination or unconscious bias. Moving on to engagement, we do a lot of sensitization on and cultural change towards building an inclusive organization. So just like I spoke about reasonable accommodation, we talk a lot about what are the different types of disabilities and what sort of inclusion measures can be taken to create inclusion for within.
Okay, I think we have a slight technical connection issue.
Would you want me to go ahead right now, or?
Well, if you can perhaps continue the presentation, I think that would be great. Yes, please.
Let me know if my screen is visible.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you.
So Sreya was talking about engagement here. In this pillar, we work a lot on the sensitization and culture change part. So there are multiple programs and initiatives that we work on, which include webinars, posts on our social media internal network, which is our basically employee network group or employee resource group, as you may call it. We do a lot of focused sessions, driving conversations around inclusion of persons with disability. We also do sensitizations in cases where people are either externally getting hired and onboarded into specific teams. For example, in case there is a vision impaired person who we are hiring in a specific team, so all the stakeholders who would be working with that particular person, we provide along with our partner organization, we give them sensitization. We work with them on sensitization sessions on how to work with persons with visual impairment. So similar to that, even if internally we are rotating people from one team to another, and there is a rotation of persons with disability, then we work on the sensitization of team that's absorbing that particular employee. Evangelism is like similar to what we are doing here, where we promote inclusion in society through industry and customer connect. So we at India, we have a disability network, which is a similar kind of forum where a lot of companies come together, share best practices, take up initiatives for hiring, driving job fairs, etc., where we can absorb more people from the community into our employment space. So that's about the 4 pillars. Then we have last year actually separated out neurodiversity from overall embracing abilities, because the overall demands of neurodiversity are a little different with regards to physical disabilities. So we are driving focused program for neurodiversity inclusion. The first pillar is education and awareness, where there are targeted sensitization sessions. We have created documents, fact sheets on neurodiversity, a language framework, hypersensitivity accommodations, etc. And these are provided to the employee network group, the people managers, to drive neuro inclusion within their teams. Along with that, inclusive hiring and onboarding, which is so we talk to business leaders, we encourage them to hire neurodiverse people in their teams. As and when we get the demands, we work with our partner organization to onboard neurodiverse people. We work on workplace accommodation and flexibility. Then employee support and engagement. So there are buddy programs. And then there are resource groups. Then we also conduct employee experience sharing sessions by parents, managers, and buddy. There is also an insurance covering neurodiversity. Then we will also work on external recognition. We were featured in the International Labour Organization for our neurodiversity journey. So this is on our neurodiversity program. Okay, so since we have now these 2 separate programs, our employee resource group for persons with physical disabilities called as capability, and our employee resource group or employee network group for persons with neurodiversity, persons of neurodiversity spectrum, is called neuroability. This is the overall objective of both the network groups.
support and empowerment, disability and awareness education, feedback and improvement, partnership and collaboration, community building, and professional development. So we work on all these six aspects with our core team of 15-20 people in each of these employee network groups to drive this across the community. In capability network, we have around 180 plus member employees, and in neuro ability we have around 200 plus member employees. This includes persons from the community, this includes allies, and this also includes caregivers. So this is the overall framework of our employee network group. Then our key initiatives include voluntary disability self-declaration communication campaign. So like Raja mentioned, for Deloitte, we have a similar disability campaign running where through various mediums like emails or our posts on our various employee network groups, through word of mouth, through BUHRs, through people managers, we are driving this communication campaign where we are encouraging employees to self-declare themselves, and we tell them that these are the XYZ benefits of you declaring in the system. It helps us make inclusive policies. It helps us work on your reasonable accommodation, accessibility needs, and overall drives an inclusive environment by strengthening the voice of the community. So this is a focused campaign that we are running. Apart from that, we have reasonable accommodation through local offices and liaison officers. So like Raja spoke about from the RPWD Act perspective, it is mandated for all the organizations to have a liaison officer. So similar to that, we have information about liaison officer featured in our equal opportunity policy as well as our intranet. We have also reserved parking for persons with disability and persons with disability help desk services, where they can avail services like manpower assistance for carrying their bags, or buggy services in case the office premises are too large and they need transport from the main gate to their building within the office premise. So all those kind of services are also available, or in case they need wheelchair or some other assistance, they can just raise a help desk service request and it will be provided to them. Along with that, in the previous presentation, Raja mentioned that there are provisions from the government, central as well as state government on tax exemptions. So we work on this with our payroll partner. People who have self-declared are getting these tax exemption benefits. Apart from this, we celebrate significant days like IDPD, Autism Day, International Day of Sign Languages. In fact, on 23rd September, we did a very successful sign languages webinar where we taught people sign language, and they were by the end of the webinar, they were able to spell their name in sign language, and around 500 people joined that webinar. Currently, we are running a campaign on World Blindness Awareness Month in our employee network group, and this is totally driven by employee network group core committee themselves. Then we also celebrated International Week of Deaf, where we ran a quiz on the accessibility for people with hearing impairment. So these are some of the things which we drive around the year as and when the significant days come. Then we have a special Empower and Include Disability Awareness and Sensitization series for different stakeholders in the organization, which includes hiring team, which includes people manager, which includes BUHR. So to all the different teams or people which are interacting with persons with disability who are employed with us, different awareness and sensitization sessions, specifically catering to how they should be interacting, what things they need to take care of using person's first language. And it includes a lot of role-playing case studies to help them get a better understanding of how they should drive their communications. And Raja here, his team is helping us drive this within our organization. This was one of the testimonials from one of our employees working with us. We have, further testimonials, but I would skip that in the interest of time. This one I would like to share. This is from Siddhant. His story as a neurodiverse person, and he has shared this with us. Having grown up a certain way, I've had my share of challenges in life. I learned differently. I would need a mentor to teach me, but I learned quickly. I realized that someone need to take a chance on me, and that someone turned out to be Capgemini. And he's still working with us. We are very happy to have him on board. Quickly moving forward, these are some of the inclusion trainings that we do. Like we mentioned on the Empower and Include series, which we specifically do on persons with disability. This is more on inclusion as an overall concept and how we would like to drive inclusion within our organization. Again, each of the training is catered to a specific audience. For example, recruitment through inclusion lens is specifically for the hiring team and the hiring managers. And the interview panelists. So this tells them that how to have inclusive hiring practices and how to actually implement it while they are interviewing. Unconscious bias training is more for our leadership, which is our very senior VP level grade Fs. Inclusion circles are sensitization sessions for employees, which are hosted by our senior leaders themselves. So these are trained senior leaders who are hosting inclusion circles for their span of control, their employees, on unconscious bias and impact of diversity and inclusion on business, encouraging their employees to drive inclusion. Culture, brain, and bias is for first-time people managers who are stepping up as from an individual contributor to a people manager role, art of acknowledging and addressing unconscious bias. Which helps them build their career as a people manager and drive inclusive teams. Inclusive leadership is conversations with our director level leaders to drive inclusion top down. So these are some of the inclusion trainings overall, which also includes inclusion of persons with disability and inclusion as an overall concept for them. Moving forward, these are some of the glimpses of our work that we do. It shows you a picture of reserved parking, braille mapping on our elevators, our sign language session, our experiential sessions that we do, where employees voluntarily nominate and our vendor partners help them experience how persons with disability would perceive things, and then help them drive inclusion in their own teams. Some of the reasonable accommodations like washrooms which are accessible to people from across the disability spectrum. So all of these are some of the glimpses of the work that we do at Capgemini in India. Then Capgemini India has also been rated as one of the best companies to work for in disability inclusion for 2024. Moving ahead, this is some of the external recognition that Capgemini India has received. Sorry, I think that slide got missed. Okay. So on the rightmost side, you would see the diversity and inclusion recognition for Capgemini India. I would not read out all of it, but you can see our efforts, and we are very happy that our efforts are recognized in multiple forums for our inclusion efforts across all spectrums of diversity, be it gender, LGBTQI inclusion, persons with disability, etc. So with that, I would end the presentation. In case there are any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very detailed, and I think we learned a lot. Thank you very much, and also congratulations for the amazing results on the Disability Equality Index, and for all the different recognitions that you have in India. It's very interesting also for us in other companies to see what you have and also to compare, to benchmark, because it's also a way for us in different companies to make sure that to see what is existing, what are the best practices in other companies, to make sure that we progress independently of the industry in which we work on this topic for the inclusion of people with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and apologies on behalf of Sreya. She mentioned categorically to, tell it to the audience that there were some technical glitches, but nonetheless, I think we completed the presentation.
No worries, you did it perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was very interesting and a source of inspiration for us, all of us, I think. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.